Okay, welcome everyone. Tonight we have another webinar kind of targeted towards our fall departure to the Caribbean. And as the title kind of indicated, it's all about another form of insurance, which I highly recommend, which is around rig inspections and making sure that everything above decks is going to hold together on your journey south. So with us tonight is Anna Maddox from MYachts, one of our major sponsors. And I'm going to turn it over to Anna. And again, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat box and we will make sure we get to them by the time we finish tonight. And this will be recorded for those that might be missing it. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Anna.
All right. Hi, welcome. Like Alex said, my name is Anna Maddox. I work for MYachts Services. I have been working there since 2018, and I've been rigging professionally since 2015. So I've been doing this a little while. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and show you a little PowerPoint. Starting here. And wait for everything to load, get it into presentation mode. Here we go. All right. So MYachts Services has a two-part division company. It was two owners of two separate companies that joined together to create MYachts Services. So a subdivision of that is rigging. I am the head rigger there now, so I lead this department. This is kind of what we do. We specialize in offshore blue water boats. Our niche is kind of anything over 35, anything under 70, that's really focused on sailing coastally and offshore. So we pay a lot of attention to structural integrity. We want to have dependable systems. We want everything to be safe and ready and, going for you. So this is kind of an overview of what we look for in a rig inspection. It's going to kind of show worst case scenarios, but these are all pictures that we have taken at our company from things that we have seen. So we like to start on deck level. We kind of look around the area, see what is totally obvious that's close by before we start moving up the mast. So the first thing we look at are going to be the turning blocks at the base of the mast. And you can see on this one that the shackle has kind of turned out and become loose. And if it keeps turning out, your block's going to pop off and, your halyard's going to slip, things are going to move. It's probably going to make a big bang. Not a fun thing that you want to do while you're sailing. We also pay attention to block orientation. You can see the block in the center of this photo has a wear spot that you can see on the bottom of it, which is turned out, and that it's not turning properly. The line's not leading through it properly, and that can lead to catastrophic failure like you see here. When it leads on the side of the block, the cheeks tend to rip open. They're not meant to be loaded on the side like that, and they break. And my PowerPoint froze. I'm sorry, guys. There we go. The next thing we look at when we get up to the top of the rig is we look at the masthead and see what's going on. This is a picture of halyard wrap. This happens on furlers, Genoa furlers, specifically staysail furlers, where the swivel and the halyards override, wrap around the foils. It's generally when you're furling in. It wraps the halyard so tight around the stay that it actually unwinds it in the wrong direction. We call this bird caging because it looks like a little wire bird cage. You can see in this slightly blurry diagram of kind of what happens. The blue line represents the stay, and the orange line represents the way a halyard should be. In the first picture, you can see that the halyard comes down very close to the stay. And if, excuse me, if the swivel were to get bound up, that halyard will wrap around the stay, creating a lot of tension. You'll have a lot of issues furling it. So the way you fix that are with the next two presented, which is either a halyard deflector, which deflects the angle of the halyard coming to the swivel, so it can't be close enough to the stay to wrap around. Or the second one is a wheel that is made to keep it from wrapping around. This is obviously showing quite a bit more distance than you'd want, but they kind of dramatize it so it can be a little more visually understood. The other way to fix halyard wrap is with swivel height. So you see in the first picture that the swivel's low and the halyard is parallel to the furler. In the second photo, they created a strop to raise the swivel height, so there's not physically enough halyard to get wrapped around. This is an issue that we see a lot. I just today fixed a furler, provided a new forestay for a guy because his swivel had gone bad and he got a halyard wrap. So we had to replace everything and cut down the top of the foils because that was bent and torn. So this is an extremely common issue that we see a lot. This is an in-person photo of how a halyard deflector is set up. If that helps make a little more sense, you can kind of see where the red halyard's coming over is the forestay. The top of the furler is underneath the shackle there. You can see the swivel in the bottom right portion of the photo, and the green halyard is being deflected away so it can't wrap around. This is another halyard wrap preventative. It is the pro furl furler style, where it has a bar that interlocks with a cone. The top cap is flat on one side, so the bar engages with the flat spot, and it clamps onto the forestay in a way that prevents it from the swivel from rotating around to the opposite side. So the halyard again can't wrap around the mast. Let me see chats, but I can't look at them right now. More furler issues. This is a dropped foil. What generally happens when a foil drops is it becomes at the bottom, at the drum, there's generally some sort of screw that attaches the foils to the drum so everything can turn together. And those screws will either back out or shear off or break. So the foils slide down. When the foils slide down, there's two issues. One, your swivel may not be on the foil as shown in this picture. And two, the foils can sit on top of your turnbuckle. If it binds in on the turnbuckle and you start furling, it can unturn your turnbuckle until it separates into halves and your forestay is disconnected, or it can turn your turnbuckle super tight and bend your rig out of shape. So we're coming down the mast a little bit now. These are wire runners in the stored position, and they are chafing on the spreaders. We see this a lot. It only happens in the stored position, but it happens every time you store it, especially when it's sitting for a while. If you're not using your staysail at the time, we see a lot of chafe. It's not like an end all of the world scenario, but we often change wire runners with Dyneema so they can't sit there and chafe and wear down, because this is not only having the stainless eat out at the aluminum, but it's also putting wear on the stainless. It has a hard point that it's sitting against that a soft line like Dyneema is not going to get as much damage from if it sits there. This is mismatched pin sizes. I wish I could zoom in a little bit. So as you can see, there is an eye that connects to the toggle. Inside the toggle, you can see daylight around the clevis pin. And you can also see the outline through the eye that goes through that toggle. So that pin is a size too small for both of those. So when we do rigging, when we build rigging, there's a correlation between wire size and pin size. And you always want your pin is going to be the strongest point of your rigging. So if your pin size is too small, it then won't have the same strength to match up with the wire and everything else. You'll also start egging the hole and pulling the toggle because you're point loading on the bottom instead of spreading the load all the way around the circle. You can see here that this one is also mismatched. It also has a super long pin that you can see on the bottommost sticking out through that black tape, that pin is too long. And you can also see that there's a gap underneath the fork attached to the tang on the mast. Mismatched pin sizes are something we see a lot, as you can tell. And it's something that tends to be really simple and easy to fix that is often overlooked. So metal fatigue. Stainless steel has a lifespan. When it comes to your standing rigging, it's 10 to 15 years, depending on how much you sail your boat and where you are. It's also about 10,000 nautical miles. So you only have so much to use before the metal starts fatiguing. For chain plates, we generally say that you have maybe 20 years for a chain plate. This is a picture of a tang, and you can actually see a crack in it. And that just comes from it being flexed on over its life. Stainless is a relatively hard metal, so as it keeps flexing, it's becoming harder and then more brittle, and it's breaking down. So how do you prevent metal fatigue is by adding toggles. So on the end of these turnbuckles, we see forks. And forks allow them to flex in the direction that the chain plate is pointed. But if it were to move in the opposite direction, so to simplify it, we'll call it fore and aft would be the opposite direction on this one. It can't bend that way. So you're going to start getting metal fatigue at the chain plate where it's trying to bend, at the fork where it's connecting to the chain plate, and then potentially even higher up where the wire connects into the turnbuckle. That's an issue when it comes to a forestay. This particular one, they use 2 link plates to connect the forestay. I wish this photo was just slightly more zoomed out, because what you can also see is there's a toggle at the end of, what you can't see is that there's a toggle on the end of the furler. So it can flex at the furler side, but it can't flex below that. And it's creating a triangle, which is both stabilizing it and forcing it when it does move, because furlers tend to move a lot, especially when you're sailing downwind. You get roll through puffs, your mast starts pumping, your forestay moves fore and aft. This prevents it from doing that, so it creates a hard spot. So this is what happens when your metal fatigue fails. So this is the end of a swage where the wire goes in. This is normally where wire breaks. Occasionally it'll break somewhere else if it goes over a bend, but it normally breaks here. So a swage is a piece of stainless that is drilled into, the wire is slid into that piece of stainless, and it is compressed down. In just a minute, I'll show you a photo of one cut open so you can see kind of how it all forms together. but you have the stainless wire, which is flexible, down to a hard smash piece of stainless, which is not flexible, creating a point between flexibility and non-flexibility, which is where things kind of start to break. Crevice corrosion. So this is a big one that everybody's been struggling with a lot, especially you guys who are sailing into salty water, and salt water sits on things and creates rust. The problem is when it gets into things. So the best thing you can do to prevent crevice corrosion is to prevent rust. If you can prevent rust by simply rinsing things off with fresh water and letting them dry out. So you can see some nice heavy little rust spots here. And with crevice corrosion, it can start on the surface or it can start internally. If water and salt and debris gets inside in between the wire and the swage, it can work its way outside. Here's that swage cut down. So you can see they cut right through the crevice corrosion, and it started as this nice little piece on the outside that's now quite deep. It's about 1/8 of an inch deep. And you can also see that flower pattern of the wire that was cut through when it was swaged down. And you can see kind of how it compresses into itself and is held in when we do our swage. This is what happens if you let crevice corrosion keeps going. Just like if you don't winterize your engine and it sits out and freezes, it expands, it blows up, and it breaks things apart. So a swage is held together by friction. We compress the wire, the stainless down onto the wire. So if we break that bond of friction, it can let loose and let go completely. So we're back to inspecting your mast. We've looked around. This is a pretty common gooseneck setup. This is where the boom attaches to the mast, and you can see that there's a pin there with a cotter pin in it, and that cotter pin looks like it's been caught and has tried to pull out. It's still intact, but it definitely should be replaced and rebent so it stays. Chain plates. This is a fun one. This is a chain plate leak. This is how you normally start seeing them. Most chain plates in boats tend to be covered with wood, or they're fiberglassed in, or they're painted over. So if you have wood trim, you can see that this wood trim has started rotting from the bottom. It's had water coming through. And I hate to say it, but it feels like most people don't notice when this starts. This is when you can really see when your chain plate started leaking. So you can see that there's kind of a dark water outline around the whole chain plate. You can see those water drips that have been running down. And where they have that rusty brown color, you know that your bolts are starting to fail because water is running in and the bolts are rusting, which is not something that you want to see. So this is where a chain plate goes through the deck. It's been rusting for a long time. The pretty shiny polished part was above deck, and the less shiny part was below deck. And that is from moisture being trapped against the stainless. Stainless needs oxygen, otherwise it starts to corrode. That corrosion again creates this splitting and breaking, and it becomes very brittle. Corrosion is something we see a lot of, not just in the form of rust, but also on aluminum. This was the bottom of a mast. It was an aluminum mast sitting on a steel plate, and the two dissimilar metals just really didn't like each other, and the aluminum's the one that gives up. It's the same reason as why you put zincs on the bottom of your boat. You need a metal that's going to give up so your prop and your prop shaft don't. You can see it here on the rivet at the bottom of this vang. So this was a stainless rivet going into an aluminum bang. You generally would prefer to use a stainless rivet because an aluminum rivet is not going to be as strong, but you need something in there to work as a barrier. So you could use something like Tef gel or blue Loctite or Lanacoat's very popular. Duralac is another option. You can even use caulking like 4000 if you wanted to. It just needs some sort of barrier to prevent the two dissimilar metals from reacting to each other. You can see the same thing happened here. This was a turning block for a Genoa sheet turning block, and you can see it's an aluminum turning block mounted onto a stainless riser with stainless screws. And this is what it looked like when it was pulled off. So not only do you see that those screws are practically welded in there with corrosion, but it's bubbled up underneath. It's broken. You can see the X's marked on the stainless piece. It's put cracks into the stainless from the pressure of it pushing through. Lifelines. So lifelines are an extremely important part of your vessel that are often replaced when absolutely necessary. You might need to check with your insurance company with what they cover. I know that things have changed, and it also depends on what you're doing. Most insurance companies and most offshore things do not, races, regattas, and other stuff, do not want you to have vinyl coated lifelines. The vinyl coating traps in salt and water, so they can start breaking and rusting, as you see here. And you can't inspect the wire to see if anything's happening to it. It's coated, so you can't see what's going on. So this would be something that we would say has failed. It's time to be replaced. It has a lot of rust there. It is breaking. You need to replace it. You can see here it has a nice rough spot. That's another form of crevice corrosion that we looked at earlier. So that lifeline, I would also suggest replacing. You can see here, this is a lifeline bail at a pulpit. You can see that there's corrosion there and cracks. It's probably been flexed a bit. That pulpit might need to be redone. It certainly should at least be cleaned up and looked at closer. You know, lifelines are your last defense. I mean, you should be have your jack lines when you're offshore, but your lifelines are the last thing that's going to catch you when you're going off the boat. Most people use them as handholds walking up and down the boat. You want those to be steady and secure for you. So this is what happens when things are overloaded. So you can see their furler has swooped around the back of their boat. It's behind their mast now instead of in front. It is being held up by a couple things. The boom bang is kind of supporting the boom on top of the bimini. So that little triangle is kind of holding the mast up, as well as either the spinnaker halyard or the Genoa halyard is still holding on forward. So this boat bumped into a bridge and just put way too much load on their forestay and broke it. We've seen this a lot. I've seen a whole bow ripped off a boat from hitting a bridge. Bridge heights are very important. You should pay attention to them. Yeah, so this is the catastrophicness that happens when something is overloaded. There's a couple different ways to do it. We often see it with hitting a bridge. You can have an accidental jibe, and I see vangs and goosenecks ripped off of boats from accidental jibes. I've seen jibe preventers that were just kind of loosely done, kind of rip out of things. Rotten deck cores get ripped out. So you want to be careful sailing, paying attention to where you're going and what you're doing. This is a toggle that was overloaded. So unlike mismatched pin sizes, you can see that this pin once fit, but the stainless has physically stretched because there was so much load on it. This wire snapped. It snapped at the core and it snapped lower down. The thing with wire, when it starts breaking, once one strand goes, it's not holding the weight of the other strands, and the other strands keep breaking as they go around. So now that I've scared you all, here is our upgrades and add-ons. These are things that we do for our offshore boats and our clients, and things that we find to be very helpful when you're sailing, especially if you're sailing with limited crew. A whisker pole is great for downwind sailing with your jib. It helps keep it out. It helps you get more air in it. It continues your point of sail so you can go further downwind than you normally would be able to. You can see it in this diagram, how it really helps you sail wing on wing and really allows that wind to fill your sails. I'm sure most of you already have a whisker pole though. Boom brakes, like I was talking with accidental jibes, a boom brake is gonna slow down your boom when that accidental jibe happens. It's gonna, the way the Wishard one works is you can loop it through once, like it's pictured here, or the other two openings, you can loop it through a couple more times to create more friction, depending on how big your sail is and how much wind you're in. So it triangulates from either side of the boom, and it allows the boom to have a lot of friction on it as it changes from one side to another. This is a second boom brake option. This one has a lever, you can see on the bottom, that you turn to adjust the amount of pressure in it. And the way that this one is rigged up, the other thing you can do, that green line is running back to the cockpit. So you can put that green line on a winch to put more pressure on it from the cockpit when things might be a little dicey to go out. A cutter stay, we actually just did this on a Hunter 50. He really wanted that cutter stay, so we just installed one on his boat about 2 weeks ago. Depending on how your boat was built, obviously we can't do it on everything if the structural integrity isn't there, but it's a great way to add an extra stay so you can have a staysail. So you can have more sail area, or you can use your staysail for your storm sail. With that, we like to do runners. This is kind of a poor diagram of an offshore runner, but what you can see, I don't know if you can see my mouse, is from the cutter stay, it runs to a point aft. So it's going to put pressure on the mast, triangulating from the cutter stay. So where the cutter stay is going to be pulling the top portion of your mast forward, that runner is going to put pressure on it aft, stabilizing your rig. And for the offshore one, we like to do a 2-to-1 purchase on the bottom. Sometimes it can be on one block, sometimes we separate it. And we like to run that through a cleat, through like a jam cleat or something, and then to a winch. So you can always close it and use the winch for something else if you need it. And it just kind of helps everything work smoothly. The wind vane, the hydro vane, I am installing one of these tomorrow. We probably do 4 or 5 new installations a year. They're a lovely self-steering tool. They're a little finicky to learn how to use. You have to be able to balance your boat sails very well. But they have an independent runner. They are totally wind powered. So if you were to lose your rudder, you can put a new one in the water with your hydro vane. It will steer your boat. Obviously, it's much smaller and it probably won't steer as well, but it works as an autopilot when everything on your boat is functioning very well. You put this on the back, you set it up, you get your boat balanced, and it will steer to the wind. So It doesn't work the way autopilot works now, where you set a mark and a course and it follows that course, but it will help you steer to the wind so you don't have to be at the wheel all the time steering. You don't have to run your autopilot, draining your batteries. The arch. This is a great way to add extra storage to your boat, to add solar to your boat. We have a fantastic welding team. This is what we like to call boat jewelry. They are wonderful welders. They do great installation. This is an arch. Funny enough, this is a returning customer. This guy got an arch originally probably 15 years ago, and he just had his boat in our shop last winter for another total refit. It was time to rebit all the hardware, all the things that had been leaking. We replaced his mast because he wanted to change from an in-mast furler to slab reefing. But back to the arch. The arch we can add davits to, so you can get your dinghy high up and really snug and secure for offshore sailing. You can see this one we added wind generators to. You can add solar panels. We can do seating. Again, it depends on the design of your boat, what's going to fit. But we've done a bunch of arches. We probably do about one every winter and do an installation on, and it's just a great way to be able to add all the extra goodies that you want on your boat that you don't necessarily have the room for in other places. Boom furlers. So if you want a furling mainsail, my favorite recommendation is the Leisure Furl boom. We also do the Schaefer boom furler. It's another nice boom furler, but I think the Leisure Furl is still my favorite. The Schaefer one just doesn't quite seem as like heavy and sturdy. And I know I haven't seen it fail. The Leisure Furl just feels a little cleaner, a little sturdier. It's a great way to get still full sail area with a furling sail. It has full batten, so you're not compromising on shape. It has the ability for unlimited reefing. And the way they cut the sail allows you to flatten the sail really easily. So it kind of limits the control lines coming back to the cockpit instead of having, 3 reef lines and a outhaul and a Cunningham and everything running back to your cockpit. You just have your main halyard and your furling line running back to the cockpit. And that furling line is your reef line, it's your outhaul, it's everything that you want it to be. So, does anyone have any questions? I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can read the chat.
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions. Let me find the chat box. I can help you with that. Okay, the first question was, is a tension gauge really necessary to adjust and tune a cruising boat?
Tension gauge is not. So I have one client that I use a tension gauge on. He has a J105 that he races, and they are very particular about their tune. Everything else we do completely by feel and by sight. For a cruising boat and bigger boats, you tension it until the boat is happy and the mast is happy. So you're looking for a straight mast. You're looking for about 15 knots of breeze, sailing kind of close hauled or beam reach. You're looking for your windward lowers to start just making little, probably like quarter-sized circles. So tuning is really done by feel and by sight. You don't need a tension gauge.
Okay, a follow-up question on tuning. On catamarans, is it the same principle with respect to the uppers and the lowers?
So catamarans are a little different because they get tensioned a lot more. They're kind of tensioned to builder spec, especially as you get into like the racy catamarans. so for catamaran, you have your diamonds, and your diamonds are what holds your mast shape. And then your uppers and your caps your caps and your forestay for the most part are what's gonna hold your mast up. So those get cranked down pretty tight, especially because there's no backstay to tension the forestay. So your cap shrouds work as your backstay, which allows you to keep tension on your forestay. So it's a little different on those. The lowers are a little looser than the caps, but you're not seeing that same movement that you would see on a monohull.
You were talking about your wrap, and you showed a couple of different solutions. Is there one that's more recommended than others?
It really is a case by case basis. It depends on how your boat is set up and how your sails cut. For the most part, I would say installing a halyard deflector is going to be the most common, simplest, and best solution for the most boats. But it can be case by case depending on what your boat is, whether you have a masthead halyard or if your halyard's a little lower. On the Selden style mast, they have the shiv box. If this was your mast and this was your forestay, the shiv box is down here, so it creates a physical separation. So on that one, if you're still getting halyard wrap, what we do is do the pendant to get the swivel up higher. Brad, if I terminate an inner forestay very high on a mast, most likely a Solent, can I avoid runners? And if yes, how close to the masthead do I need to get? So a Solent rig, which is where you put the additional forestay in front of the existing forestay or very close to it, you can avoid runners, but big but it depends on how your mast was built and what your mast manufacturer recommends. So on a Selden mast, we have talked to Selden, we have done a Solent style where we haven't done runners, but they have a very specific, this is where you can install this. If you install it, you know, 2 centimeters this way or 2 centimeters that way, we want you to install runners. So it's very particular about the spacing where you can put it in. So it kind of, again, is case by case basis. It how your mast is set up and what we can do with the layout of your mast and how it's built structurally, whether it can handle that.
Okay. By the way, I apologize for disappearing. My internet connection from here in Europe is pretty flaky. Did you answer the question that I asked about the 10,000 miles versus 14,000 in my case?
No, I did not. So
So
10,000 miles is a pretty hard rule. Especially, I think the other thing that may have happened with your case, and I've seen it on a couple more boats recently, there seemed to be like a bad batch of wire somewhere between like 2019 to 2020. Let me backtrack a little bit. Long story condensed is what stainless steel wire made in the US is only made for government procurement at this point in time. So all wire is going to come from Korea. There's several different Korean manufacturers. There's the best manufacturer, there's the second best manufacturer, and then there's a couple other ones. Kind of at the onslaught of COVID, or maybe a little before that, the best Korean manufacturer stopped being able to provide their wire for us for a period of time. And a lot of boats ended up being built with the wire that is a lower grade. And when I say us, I mean the rigging world in general, boat builders and everything else. So there's this section of boats that have less great wire, even though on paper it says it's still grade 316 stainless steel wire. There's something about it that rusts more. I don't know if it's missing a protective coating, like a finishing polish or something, but I've seen it produce more rust. And in 3 years, it looks more like 7 years old.
Right. Because that was the problem that we had. Now, the other thing though is we did have 14,000 miles on the boat.
You
And
did. That's a lot of metal fatigue. That is
yeah, I
asking a
was
lot of it.
right. I was surprised too, but we added up the, I looked at the log and that's the number. So maybe some of the fatigue, I mean, well, I'll blame it on the manufacturer anyway, because I'm trying to get it covered under warranty, but clearly
Absolutely.
we're definitely over that magic number. Okay.
Yeah, so that 10,000 miles is a magic number.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Well, if you don't, well, think about it another minute or two. I will just put another pitch in for, I've now owned my boat for 3 years. We've done a rig inspection every year, and every year we've found something. And it's good insurance. So if you haven't done it and you're planning to go offshore this fall, I highly suggest you do it. And
Absolutely.
I'm I'm allowed to put a pitch in for MYachts too, because I think they've done a great job.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. We think that we're doing good work. We're super busy. If our schedule says anything, then we're definitely doing good work because it's hard to get openings. So if you need a rig inspection before you leave, start asking now.
Yeah, that was actually, thank you for mentioning that. That was the other thing we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. You don't wait for the last minute because you're not going to find anybody to do it.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
if you have problems, it's even, then you have less time to get it fixed.
absolutely.
Okay, well, Anna, thank you very much. And this is really great. Next time you can use more pictures of all our broken parts. But the good
Sure
news is
thing.
none of them are broken when we were offshore, so that says something. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording and thank everybody for joining us. This will be posted for those that either came in late or aren't here for the live presentation. And I think our next one is on Thursday. And I think we're talking about single-handed shorthanded sailing. So with that, I will stop the recording